Hey guys, what's cracking? Godsman here, coming at you today with a card review of sorts. Not a custom card review, no, that's different, but we are on Reddit just like custom card review for this because, to be quite frank, my camera quality isn't exactly the greatest in full screen, so I thought, hey, I have the medium right here, you'll still see my lovely face on the side, and we'll review a couple cards today. So, just as a little bit of a background info, I was coming back from college. You see I'm all dressed up and everything, and one of my buddies was hitting me up as I was just chillaxing. He's like, yo, we got Shadow Paladin reveals. Oh, and Narukami. Shadow Paladin reveals. I'm like, okay, let's go. So here we are. And to be quite frank, I've reviewed these a little bit over. I've even done a quick couple test hands with them on the side, just to be completely transparent, and I do like these. So I want to give some of my basic thoughts before we go into the real meaty testing here on these Shadow Paladin cards. And if I feel like it, also do the Narukami ones. Although to be frank, I'm not quite as knowledgeable about that. But hey, who's keeping track, right? Okay, so let's start with the new stride we got, which is Dark Knight Claw Kruwak. So, weird name. I don't know the idea behind it, but anyways, he's a cool stride. So anyway, his skill is Act on Van once per turn. The cost is retiring 2 rear guards, and by paying this cost, your opponent chooses 3 of their rears and retires them. Classic Shadow Paladin fashion, your opponent chooses. But if they didn't retire 3, a la Dauntless Reverse style, this unit gets auto Van once per turn. At the end of the battle where this unit attacked, you counterblast one and retire 2 rears to stand this unit. And as well as it gets 10k to the end of the turn. Note that the 10k that it gains is for all of the turn. It's not just when you restand, that's important to note. So this guy's gonna be swinging at minimum for 38 twice. That's pretty good. Now, what are my basic thoughts on this? Well, they're pretty positive. See, I think Kruwak is a very nice generic stride. So there's a few properties to go over. One is that it doesn't flip up any cards in the G zone. And that's really nice for your ratios, because that means that really, if you just got a space for 1 extra G card, just have a copy of this in here. It doesn't hurt, right? It doesn't flip up anything, and it's pretty meshable. As for its utility, well, really, it seems to work best when your opponent doesn't have a lot of cards in the field, obviously, because otherwise it's just retire 3 to have them retire 3, and it's a nice bit of control, but it's not exactly the greatest. So ideally, you want to activate this when they have 2 or less rears, which is sort of like Phantom Blast or Diablo, but a bit different, right? So they have 2 or less rears, then this is online, and it's a good restander. It really is a good restander, because the key thing to note is for this multi-tech, you don't lose any drive checks. So you're getting triple drive twice with this thing. And when it comes to card economy, you are, objectively speaking, losing 4 cards as you're retiring 2 rears just to activate the basic skill. And if you've managed to unlock the main skill here, then you have to retire 2 more rear guards in addition to counterblast. So you're missing out 4 cards technically in order to get another triple drive. But of course, drive checks have more pressure. This is a big van attack. We went over the fact it gets plus 10k, so it's pretty big. And at the end of the day, this is Shadow Paladin we're talking about, so we didn't call those rear guards from hand. We most certainly called some from deck. So at the end of the day, yeah, card economy wise, it's phenomenal. It's got an extra multi-attack. The only thing that holds him back is the fact that it's reliant on what the opponent's game state is. If it wasn't for the fact that the opponent having a big board would essentially make this offline, yeah, if it wasn't for that fact, this would just be pretty nutty. So, they reined it in a little bit here, kind of like how the Clan Collection design ethos is like, but I still would rate this like 8 or 9 out of 10. I think a lot of Shadow Paladin decks are going to be running this at a copy or 2. I mean, come on, it's a nice restander, and its conditions are not that hard to fulfill for such a powerful restand. So yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be running this. So even more hype than Claw Kruwak is going to be Dark Dragon, Deep Griever Dragon. Lovely names. Always love the Shadow Paladin names. Why wouldn't you? So, Deep Griever has 1 skill, which is auto when it's put on Guardian Circle. So, gee willikers, I wonder why. You choose up to 5 grade 1s from your drop zone and put them to the bottom of your deck in any order. For each card placed, this unit gets shield plus 5k until the end of the turn, or maybe the end of the battle. if you put 5 cards, you pay a counterblast in order to make the unit this thing is defending not be hit until the end of the battle. Man, this recycles en masse and is a big shield which can then be a pseudo-perfect guard? What the freak? This is the best G-Guard Shadows have now, hands down. Shadows goes through their deck really quickly. Really quickly. I mean, just look at it, right? Luard, you get a lot of grade 1s from the deck, and of course, people immediately thought of Luard when they thought, oh, pull these grade 1s back from the drop zone to the bottom of the deck. Yeah, look, but a lot of other Shadow Paladin decks also run through them like mad. I mean, heck, Claritzor is essentially Grand Blue's mill deck, you know, except it's not quite as aggressive, at the milling part at least. Then you've got Revengers, which with all the Raging Form attacks and Superior Calling from deck, you're basically drive checking half your deck over the course of turn 3 and turn 4 if you pop off. So you're going to be pretty close to deck out pretty soon. Trust me, I'm an authority on that. And then, you know, even things like blasters and whatnot to a lesser extent, they fear these things. So yeah, a lot of deck out going over. And this directly counters it by putting your most important grade back into the deck. Yeah, that's really good. And this isn't even to mention the fact that it's a strong shield. You know, it can be a potential 40k if you don't need the perfect guard. That's beyond crit sentinel numbers. That's phenomenal. And if you've got the CB to spare, then you just say no. Yeah, and also the fact that it says up to means that, okay, if you just need, like, let's say 30 shield, right? You don't want to pay the Soul Blast for Dark Veil or something, and of course 30k is above the Plot Maker threshold, then this is perfect for you. Now, as to how many copies you run, and if this is replacing your G-Guards, that's something debatable. I think it depends on the deck you're running. The War's a little bit tricky because they can use basically all the G-Guards, but I'm going to just make a call here and say that this is going to replace either Dark Veil or Plot Maker. Honestly, I'm leaning more towards Dark Veil because Dark Veil got plus 5k for every 2 grade 1s you had to drop, and it costs a Soul Blast to do so, which may or may not be tough, but usually it's fine. So it can get pretty big. Like, let's say you had 10 grade 1s in the drop zone. That meant that you got an extra boost to 25. Here's the thing. This thing can get a boost to 25, but for half the grade 1s, and you're recycling them back. So yeah, it's probably going to replace that between the two. It's also just kind of a stronger plot maker. The one thing that I have a grievance with Deep Griever is that recycling grade 1s is really nice. It really is. But on the back end, you don't want to use this too liberally because otherwise you have no grade 1s in there, and if you're a ritual-based deck, then suddenly, you ran up all your ritual fodder. Not to mention that you've also sort of made your deck a bunch of grade 1s and whatever was left over, so your drive checks in the late game may not be that threatening because you'll probably just be hitting back in your grade 1s. So yeah, be careful of the recycling. Use this kind of sparingly. Don't just put 5 in every time just because you can, because that's a little bit excessive. So if you play wisely with it, then yeah, I would say it's the best G-Guard. And yeah, that's going to do it for the Shadow Paladin ones. And yeah, I would say that overall, Bushy did really good. They did really right by one of their favorited clans, I'll be real. I think everyone knows by this point, Shadow Paladin is their favorite child, along with things like Kagero and whatnot. Yeah, so rating overall, this G-Guard is definitely the hype highlight. If you ask me, I think I'm going to splash this in everybody's deck. And yeah, this is like 10 out of 10. I couldn't have asked for anything better. It's 9 perfect, and oh man, I can't wait to test it out so much. And it really, I'm going to be testing out so much, boys. So let's move on over to the Narukami reveals. And we're back. So, we've got here the Stride and the G-Guard for Narukami, as is tradition for this premium selection set. So, getting right down to it, we've got Conquering Supreme Dragon, Exterminate Dragon. Yeah, appropriately vicious name, not gonna lie. So anyway, yeah, basic stats, types, all that, right? To be expected. So 2 skills for this guy. First is auto. When it's placed on Van Circle, you Soul Blasts in order to draw a card for each empty rear circle in your opponent's front row. Pretty sweet. Second effect is Act costs Counterblast 1, and all the units in your front row get plus 10k until end of the turn for each empty rear circle in your opponent's front row. So, yeah, this thing is pretty cool. It's weird to think about it because as opposed to things like Stunverse, which will bind on Moss and then net you a lot of draws and then have your opponent bind a lot of cards, it's like honestly, it's an economy monster. Like the worst nightmare if your opponent's trying to conserve resources. This guy doesn't do that. He's sort of the opposite. So at first I wasn't too impressed because I was like, well, yeah, okay, sure, empty rears. But if your opponent doesn't have like empty rears, this is kind of sucky, especially since the first effect here is when placed on VC, so you miss the timing if you want to use your rear guards to try and bind stuff. But fret not, Narukami has ways during the opponent's turn to bind their rear guards, thanks to the G guards, which, spoiler alert, this one down here does something to that effect too. But anyway, yeah, you also things like Bulwark and Impede and whatnot, so it's definitely possible. Not to mention that, at least with this second effect, it is an act, so you are able to enable it after you've called things down like Cho'o or whatnot in the case of like, well, I mean, I would say Eradicator for Cho'o, but really Cho'o could be stable in a lot of different decks, so, you know, fair play, right? It's a nice buff card, really. It buffs and it draws, so this is probably best if your opponent didn't invest too much in the early game, so this is a kind of a cool first stride, right? They didn't give you much, so Stunverse doesn't feel very profitable, but on the other hand, you only have nothing else to go to. It feels like a good substitute to V-Buster or something that way. So yeah, will people stride into this ever? Will they run it? Possibly, again, just like the Shadow Paladin stride, I suspect this will be a theme of a lot of the other strides too, is that it doesn't flip up any G cards. So because it doesn't flip up any G cards, you can just put it in one copy for that what-if scenario, and that's really its greatest strength, is the fact that it does have that niche that it fulfills, which is what if your opponent didn't give you cards, right? So yeah, for that alone, I think Exterminate, yeah, he's a nice one to maybe two of. So now we have Sky Guardian, Supreme Dragon, Counteract Dragon. Okay, I get 2 for 2 on the names for the Narukami units, not bad. So, yeah, basic stats, basic things to know. One effect. When it's placed on Guardian Circle, yeah, your opponent chooses up to 2 of their rear guards in the front row and binds them. If they didn't bind 2, then it gets shield plus 10. But if they didn't bind any, then it gets an additional 10 shield. So it goes from 15 to 25 to 35. Now, just to be quite frank with it, this isn't as strong as the Shadow Paladin G-Guard, I believe. This one relies on your opponent's decision. So, of course, your opponent is going to choose what's most optimal for them. So, unless you catch them in a catch-22 situation, this isn't that great. Now, it's not all bad, though, because I can see a particular instance where this is still a pretty powerful shield. I think one of the things about Narukami is they don't exactly have most powerful shields in G-Guards. They do have the one that binds 2 cards of different grades from your drop zone or to get 10k, and this is sort of like that too, right? And of course, your opponent binding 2 rear guards, that's not happening, so this will be getting 10k, so it's a 25k shield. But whether or not it gets 35 is up to your opponent. Now, if they swing with rear first before Van or anything, or really if, let's say that they swung with Van or they just swung with it or whatever, so it's their first rear attack, and they've got another rear in the front row. If you slap this down, they're gonna be inclined to not bind either unit in the front row, because if they do, then they're losing out on an attack one way or another, and that's pretty bad. So they're probably going to be giving you the plus 20k shield for that, making it 35 shield, so it's a bit above a crit cent. So in that one particular instance, it's really assured for you, but it gets messy after that, and anything that lets the opponent decide is generally kind of messy and hard to contend with. So yeah, all said, it's pretty good. I'm going to expect that this is a one of G-Guard though. One of that you put alongside Bulwark and Impede. And yeah, it's a good one of for that because it boosts the binding agenda, unlike the one that will just ensure that you get plus 10k. This one boosts binding the opponent's cards, and of course if they so choose, while also having more shield value. So I think it is what Narukami needed, albeit it didn't need it very desperately. And yeah, that'll do it for today's reveals. So yeah, Narukami and Shadow Paladin, nice. Bushy gave him some good stuff to chomp on, and I'm looking forward to testing with both of these. We got some Narukami folk who play in my group as well, and yeah, they're going to be just as excited to play these as I'm going to be excited to play Shadows. Actually, that might be not going to be real because I'm really excited to do it. But anyway, that'll be all for today's video. Leave a comment down below if there's anything I missed about these cards. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. And if you guys would like to see more of these quick little card reviews, please do let me know, because I may or may not be doing more of these frequently. I just did it today because, of course, Shadows got revealed, and I'm admittedly pretty hyped. But yeah, if you guys want to see this more frequently, then yeah, let me know down below. And with that, thank you. God bless.